If you're struggling to stay consistent with your routine, maybe you stick with it for like 3 or 4 days, but then you eventually slip back into your old habits, then this video is for you. So why should you listen to some awesome stranger on the internet? Well, because just a couple of years ago, I used to be that guy who couldn't follow a routine. But now I've been able to follow a routine consistently for 3 years straight. Lifting weights, studying, growing my business, and training martial arts 6 days a week. This video is going to be a masterclass on how to design a routine that you actually follow. I came up with these tips after reading hundreds of books on self-help, habit formation, behavioral psychology, and neurology. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is that initially they make the routine incredibly hard. If you are someone who has never lived a life based on a routine and now all of a sudden you are adding 20 activities to this routine and then you just plan to do them back to back to back without any breaks between them, then you're very likely going to fail. Think of this person who has never been to the gym and on the very first day he decides to start deadlifting 500 pounds. You would think that person is insane. He's probably going to injure himself and burn out and not show up at the gym next day. But that is exactly what most people are doing with their routines. They get hyped up and write a bunch of activities and think that they are actually going to follow them. I too have been a victim to this. I decided that, you know what, I'm going to wake up at 4:30 a.m. I'm going to study for 4 hours. I'm going to go hit the gym for 1 hour, come back and read a bunch of books. But that is not exactly what ended up happening. I actually did wake up at 4:30 a.m. But turns out that this routine now seemed like such a mountain to climb that I actually got anxious and overwhelmed and I decided not to do anything at all. I ended up playing video games at 4:30 a.m. What I then decided to do was follow the principle of progressive overload. So initially in your routine, maybe have like 4 or 5 activities at max and make sure that the intensity of these activities is very, very manageable, especially if these are the activities that you have never done before. Like if you're not someone who's used to reading books, then do not start by reading 1 hour a day. Start by maybe 10-15 minutes. You have to remember this, that the purpose of a routine is not to make earth-shattering efforts every single day. If you do that, you are going to burn out by day 3, day 4. Purpose of a routine is simply to get 1% better than you were yesterday. That is it. Now don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you will forever remain a beginner with few activities at lower intensities. No, once you get a hang of your routine, once you start building consistency, maybe day 7, day 10, then you can start increasing the intensity of these activities. I've asked plenty of people that I work with like, hey, do you have a routine? And the answer to this is almost always, yes, of course I do have a routine. And to that I respond like, hey, could you show it to me? And the answer that I usually get is that, no, I don't have it in a physical place. It's just in my head and I don't have specific times for activities. It's just that I distribute them vaguely in terms of mornings or afternoons or night. But the problem is when you make your routine this vague and you do not have immediate access to it, then it sort of stops serving its purpose. The main purpose of a routine is to consciously and subconsciously prepare you for the upcoming task and to eliminate the process of decision making completely. So the first thing that you need to do when you design your routine is write down the timing of each of the activities right next to them. You need to know precisely what you are doing at what time. Then you need to place that routine somewhere where you can access it immediately, perhaps in your cell phone or on some whiteboard. This routine is something that you're going to refer to the entire day. The next common mistake that people make is where they place the tasks in the routine. You need to understand something about your brain. During the day, your dopamine levels are quite high. This means that you're much more active, motivated, full of energy. The beginning half of the day is where you should be putting all your challenging and cognitively demanding tasks. Later on in the day is where your serotonin levels are much higher, meaning you're a lot more relaxed, you have that soothy, calm feeling. Also, by the time you reach the end of the day, you are kind of depleted. This is where you're supposed to keep the lighter tasks of the day, like journaling, maybe meditating or doing some light reading. A lot of the people that I've worked with often complain that, hey, I want to get so much done, but I'm just unable to do so after work or after school. And I'm like, that's obvious. You're not going to be able to do productive work if you are drained after 8 hours of working. The best solution to this problem is that you actually start your day earlier and go to bed earlier. If you can actually wake up 1 or 2 hours early and use that time to do these productive things, you are going to do them far more consistently than if you had placed them at the end of your day. Every single activity that is on your routine has some barriers to it that make that activity harder to perform. Like if you're supposed to study but your desk is a total mess, your notes are not available to you, you haven't decided on what subject you're going to study, then the likelihood that you're going to study decreases significantly. So what you need to do once you've prepared your routine is to actually visualize yourself performing all these activities in your routine. And you need to remove these barriers before you even begin the activity. Like if you visualize yourself going to the gym, then you would think about, oh, what shoes are you going to wear? What kind of workout are you going to do? Where is the gym located? Once you have the answers to these questions, the barriers are lifted, and all of a sudden the next day it's incredibly easy to just go walk to the gym. Once your routine is prepared, you need to ask yourself this question: what can happen tomorrow that is going to absolutely mess my routine up? And trust me, when you do this exercise, you're going to come up with a bunch of reasons that could absolutely destroy your routine. For example, your gym might be closed due to bad weather, or your routine might get derailed because of some emergency task that showed up last minute. So once you've figured out that what could possibly go wrong, you need to create backup plans for these situations. Like if you think the gym might be closed tomorrow, perhaps have an indoor bodyweight workout ready with you just in case. Or for some reason you woke up late or had an emergency and lost a bunch of time, then decide what are the core activities in the routine that you're still going to do but perhaps at different times, and what are the filler activities in the routine that you have to cut off just to compensate for the time. The more you think about your routine, the more backup plans you come with, the more scenarios of failures you visualize, the more likely you are going to be able to follow your routine. But if you're unprepared for all these tricky scenarios, then you are going to give up on your routine entirely. Look, even after all this preparation and all this visualization, sometimes life just happens. Maybe you just woke up feeling tired, fatigued, unmotivated, or perhaps just had a very stressful conversation with a family member. Then you're probably not going to be in a mood to follow your routine the entire day. On these days, I follow something called the 30% rule. I pretty much follow my routine, but I do all the activities with just 30% intensity. So instead of working out for 60 minutes, I would work out for 20 minutes on that day. And instead of reading for 30 minutes, I would just read for 10 minutes. What happens when you lower the intensity of an activity is that it requires lesser energy to start, and you're much more likely to do that activity even when you're feeling down. But once again, you can be hit with this destructive all or nothing mindset. It's a voice in your head telling you that it's not worth doing something for 20 minutes, it's not going to be impactful, might as well not do anything. And this is the number one consistency killer, this perfectionist mindset. What you need to do is actually tell yourself that, bro, these days are inevitable. You're going to probably have thousands and thousands of bad days during the course of your life. If you decided to do nothing on those days, you would make zero progress. If you decided to do just a little bit, a tiny bit of effort on those days, you're going to make astronomical progress in the long run. One other great benefit of this 30% rule is that the momentum of consistency stays with you. If you haven't skipped an activity for like 10 days in a row, it's much more likely that you're not going to skip it on the 11th day. But if you decided to do nothing at all on one particular day, it is kind of likely that you might not be able to resume that activity the next day. Imagine if you could feel highly motivated, highly energetic the moment you sat down to do a task which is on your routine. Whether it's studying, working out, you were just like full of energy and pumped and ready to go. But that isn't really what happens. Most people actually fail to do a task on their routine is because when they actually go out there to attempt the task, they feel lazy, tired, out of energy, unmotivated, and eventually they just decide to skip the task and do something fun instead. And the funny part is they get this burst of energy and motivation right when they're about to fall asleep. You see, your body has a clock of its own which pretty much dictates when you're going to be alert and energetic and when you're going to be tired and sleepy. This is called your circadian rhythm. If your circadian rhythm is messed up, then no matter what fancy routine you designed for yourself, you are never going to be able to follow it long term. So the first thing that makes the bedrock of long-term consistency is actually feeling alert and motivated when you're supposed to, and feeling tired and sleepy when you're supposed to. Your circadian rhythm can actually be adjusted by the sunlight that you're getting. What I personally do is as soon as I wake up, I go for a 5 to 10 minute walk. This way I'm getting direct sunlight and I'm sending the right message to my body that, hey, look, the sun is out. It's time to work. It's time to bump out the right hormones. It's time to get me energetic. It's time to get me motivated. Then for the rest of the day until late in the evening, I try to get as much sunlight as possible. I would probably go for one of these short walks after every 90 minutes or 2 hours. This way I'm constantly sending the right message to my body. Now light has this property to keep you alert and suppress sleep, but you actually do want to fall asleep later in the day. So later in the day, like 2 hours before my bedtime, I would dim away all the lights and just turn on this tiny little yellow lamp that I have. This way the body gets the opposite message. It gets the message that, hey, calm down, it's night time, relax, turn things down. Just by getting the right signals to your body and feeling the right way at the right times, you are going to realize that you're a lot more consistent with your routine. I remember a time when I was sitting in my math class and there was a professor teaching things. I could see what was being written on the board. I could kind of hear what he was saying, but nothing registered in my head. It was as if I was a deer seeing headlights, completely zoned out. And this wasn't like one isolated incident. This was the story of my life. Each time I would actually sit down to do something hard, something cognitively demanding, I would find it incredibly hard to pay attention to it, and I would just get lost in my own thoughts or find this thing too boring, and eventually I would give up and do something fun. And because of this pattern, I could never stick to a routine. It was impossible for me. So after trying a bunch of different things to fix my attention span, I finally found that fasting worked incredibly well for me. With a fasting based protocol, I am now able to do 4 to 5 hours of focused productive works. And I know someone who has never actually tried to work in a fasted state would probably say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. How does not eating food affect your attention span? But the thing is that when you consume large, heavy, carb-filled meals, then your body has to commit a lot of energy and resources into just digesting that meal. And this takes away from your cognitive ability. And then you have an incredibly hard time paying attention and doing demanding tasks. So these days what I do is for the first 5 to 6 hours of the day, I do not eat anything. And it is during this time where I try to get most of my deep productive work done. Once you have these two protocols dialed down and your circadian rhythm is on point and your attention span is on point, now you can begin to start designing yourself a routine that you will actually follow. The first thing when it comes to designing a routine is that you need to isolate 2 to 3 core tasks. Ask yourself this question: what are the 2 to 3 things you would like to get done in a day? And if you got them done, then you would consider that day as successful. We are going to call these things your core tasks of the day, and they are going to get the highest priority in your day. What you're going to do next is you are going to put these core tasks in your routine, and next to each task, you are going to write the time at which you intend to perform that task. And I know that just writing the time down might not feel like a big deal. You're probably thinking that I know the time in my head. No, write it down next to the task. What writing the time down does is that it removes the process of decision making. Tomorrow when you wake up, when you're lost and confused, when you have 1,000 different thoughts coming up, all you have to do is ignore all of them and simply look at what your routine says. The decisions have been made for you. The next important thing is, where exactly do you place these core tasks? I try to put most of my core tasks early on in the day. This is when you're the freshest. This is when you're really motivated. This is when you're not stressed out. You're not cognitively burnt out. You are a lot more likely to do productive things early on in the day. I have tried putting my core tasks later on in the day, like after university or after work, and I realized that I am either a lot too drained or there are way too many thoughts going on in my head for me to actually sit down and focus. Once you've actually prioritized your core task, you are going to notice that you still have a lot of free time throughout the day. Maybe it's spread in chunks or maybe it's continuous. This is where I start adding in something called soft tasks. Now these tasks are not necessarily the most cognitively demanding or challenging, but these are rather things like meditation, listening to a podcast, going out for a walk. These are things that still give you contentment, are still kind of fun to do, but they are not essential part of your day.